Good evening, everyone. My name's John Paul. I work with AAA Northeast. We're headquartered actually in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm in my basement in Massachusetts. My background, I've been with AAA for a little bit more than 35 years at this point. And before I came to work at AAA, I worked as an auto mechanic. I was an ASE certified master technician auto mechanic. And then after many years of doing that, I came to work at AAA and I ran something called the AAA Auto Diagnostic Center, which was a business that AAA had where we would check out cars for people, let them know what kind of condition they were in. Maybe it was a car they were considering buying as a used car. Maybe it was a car they were considering selling, or maybe they just wanted a clean bill of health for that car, so they could know what kind of shape the car was in. Maybe they're planning a long trip. Did that for a while, then ended up in the approved auto repair department, and then ended up in the public affairs department, and then in the last couple dozen years, I work in public affairs and I do presentations, but I'm really kind of an automotive consumer advocate. I try to help people with their automotive problems, their car problems. I try to help them with their car choices. I write newspaper columns for the Boston Globe, which you can read on boston.com, the Providence Journal, which you can read on projo.com, and at least for a little while, Long Island Newsday, where you can't read it anywhere unless you subscribe to Long Island Newsday. And there's also some other little weekly papers you might see here and there that my column is in. So I try to help people with their questions and comments and problems with their cars, and just try to help them with a variety of different things. So that's what I'll try to do. I will, if you have a question, you can try unmuting your microphone and asking it. Maybe just turn your camera on for a second so I know that you want to ask a question, then leave your microphone on, and that way I'll know. The program is called Under the Hood, and it goes over some basic preventative maintenance that's necessary to really take care of your car. And if you can do just a few basic things, and cars have gotten so dependable in the last 30 or 40 years. When I first worked as a mechanic, it was not unusual to have to do major engine repairs at 35 or 40,000 miles. And then it was not terribly unusual at 80 or 90,000 miles to have to rebuild the engine in the car, rebuild the transmission in the car. The parts didn't last that long. Now we see those same components, engines and transmissions, in a lot of cases lasting 200,000 miles, 300,000 miles. I just read of a Ford Explorer that someone been crisscrossing the country in that I think has close to 500,000 miles on it. So cars do last a lot better, a lot longer, because it's easier to take better care of them these days, because maintenance is a little bit different than it was when I first started repairing cars, where you change the oil in the car every couple thousand miles, and the engine coolant every year, and the radiator hoses and the fan belts, every 3 years. In fact, if you look back at, quite a while ago, back in the 50s and 60s, the typical new car warranty was only a year. Now we're seeing car warranties that are 5 years. Engine warranties are 10 years and 100,000 miles with some cars, some even 150,000 miles. So the cars are designed to last a lot longer. In fact, right now, the average car on the road is as old as it's ever been since they've been keeping track of this sort of stuff. The average car on the road is nearly 12 years old. So people are keeping their cars longer, and especially during this COVID time, people that maybe thought about trading a car are not doing it, or maybe they decided they're going to keep a third car where maybe they only had two, and that third car is one that their kids are going to use to avoid public transportation, things like that. So we're always there trying to help with those kinds of decisions. So that's kind of what we do. But again, the program is called Under the Hood. I have a PowerPoint presentation to show. We'll kind of go through it. I was just waiting for, it looks like one more person is trying to connect to the audio here, but we'll try to go through it and go through the presentation. And it's a lot of questions that have already been asked, so it may inspire you to ask another one. So we'll do this, share it, and again, the program is called Under the Hood, and Under the Hood looks a lot different now than it did when I first started repair cars. It's a fairly simple engine these days, but awfully complicated to what cars looked like maybe back in the 50s and the 60s. I looked at a 66 Dodge Dart the other day, and we just kind of remarked how simple the engine is. So Ben Franklin was a wise man. He once said, "An ounce of prevention is a pound of cure," especially when it comes to car maintenance. A little bit of maintenance can go a long way to make sure your car is not going to break down. Maintenance is the key. To do it correctly, it doesn't have to be expensive. Generally, it can be easy. There's a lot of stuff you can do yourself. And in a lot of cases, it doesn't require any real tools other than maybe something as simple, I don't know if you can still see me, something as simple as a tire gauge, which I always seem to have one around. So when we look at this, we look at the best advice to know about your car comes from the car's owner's manual. It doesn't come from me. It doesn't come from some wise uncle you might have. It comes from the owner's manual. The owner's manual has all the important information in it. And unfortunately, most owner's manuals, the only time they come out of the glove compartment is because they're taking up too much room and people want to store other stuff in the glove compartment. And that's when they come out, but people don't look at them enough. And there's an awful lot of good information in the owner's manual that people don't really think about. In fact, I got an email today from somebody who had a question about their Volkswagen and warranty coverage, and it was in the owner's manual, and they could have answered. I was able to look it up, but the information's right there. What should you check? Well, the three major reasons we tow people's car or service people's cars at AAA, the AAA Auto Club that I belong to, is there's about 5.6 million members, and we probably do about 3.5 million road service calls a year. And the majority of those calls are for dead batteries, flat tires, people that ran out of gas, people that locked their keys in their car, and things like that. So those are the reasons that we go out to rescue people. So what a better way to try to not have that happen by checking that maintenance ahead of time. So if you can take care of those things, you're that much better off. So what do we look at? Batteries, fluids, wipers, lights, tires, and oil. Simple enough. So we'll go into some of those. Batteries, well, the battery's sort of the heart of the electrical system. It's the thing that gets the car going. The typical life of a battery in the Northeast is a little bit under 5 years. So if your battery is more than 3 years old, you should have it tested. If it's more than 5 or 6 years old, and I have a car that's a 2015, it has the original battery in it. The battery was technically put in 2014. That battery is probably at the end of its life. Even though it starts up and runs great and does everything it's supposed to do, it's probably at the end of its life, just because batteries do have a certain amount of life left to them, and you have to consider at some point you're gonna need to replace it. So a couple things to look for are the connections clean and tight. You can just kind of wiggle the battery connections, and if they move, they need to be tightened. If there's a lot of corrosion, kind of powdery corrosion around them, if you go out there with some baking soda or water, pour it on top of it, it will cut the acid away. And if you go out there with a little stiff brush, you can clean up the battery connections without even taking anything apart. But AAA will come out and test your battery if that's what you want to do. But you can also have your battery tested in many different places. So why do batteries fail? It's not the cold, and a lot of people think it's the cold that causes a battery to fail. The cold weather is what causes a battery to work really hard, but the heat is what actually causes a battery to fail. In places like Phoenix and Orlando, Florida, batteries only last a couple of years versus up here where they last about 5, because it's the heat that does it. Vibrations, if a battery is not mounted correctly, all batteries have a hold down, a bracket that keeps the battery from bouncing around. And sometimes what happens when cars get older, the bracket gets lost and it's not there anymore, or it's rusted away and it's not holding the battery tight, and that will shorten the life of the battery. And also a charging system, so the generator that charges the battery back up, if that is not working properly, that will certainly shorten the life. Cars will overheat. I just got an email from, actually it was a phone call, from one of our members. She called me because she said she was not getting heat in her car. It was a cooler day last week. She went to turn the heat on, there was no heat in the car. And so I gave her some suggestions on things that could be wrong with the heater. But I said to her, one of the things you need to worry about is there coolant in the car? Is there antifreeze in the car? And she said, I don't know. I have the car serviced every 4,000 or 5,000 miles, and they always tell me to check it. So I said, well, that would be the first place I would want to look. Then she called me the next day. She decided to bring it in for service. She called me the next day and said, on the way to the service place, the temperature gauge went all the way up near the hot. It never steamed over like this picture, but it did go all the way up into the hot. And what happened was the radiator went bad in the car. And she actually did follow these steps. It didn't go quite into the hot range, so she kind of just drove slowly and didn't let it overheat. She did turn on her heater, which gets more water circulating, and she made it to the repair shop and didn't do any damage. If your car goes in, if the temperature light comes on, the hot light comes on, so not that it's just wavering, the gauge is wavering around the hot zone, but if the hot light comes on, that's something that means you need to pull over right away, because it only takes about a half a mile of driving with the engine steaming over to ruin the engine. So you want to pull over right away. The other fluids, sort of the oil is really if the battery's the heart, the oil is the blood of the car. You should check the oil regularly on a car that maybe uses a little bit of oil. And all cars will burn a little bit of oil. It's part of the natural combustion process. Sometimes you can go 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 miles and you won't use a quart of oil. Some cars you'll use a quart of oil every 400 or 500 miles. So you should check the oil occasion, once a week, once every couple of weeks, once a month, depending on the car. We have an older car. It's an 09. And I bought it. It was very inexpensive. It's kind of a spare car, and it has 100,000 miles on it. It hasn't seemed to use a lot of oil, but it's a car that typically does burn a little bit of oil. And it doesn't, but then we haven't driven it that much either. So it's important to use the right kind of oil for your car, proper weight and grade. Some cars require synthetic oil. Some cars require synthetic blend oil. And all cars have a certain requirement of the weight of the oil. Years ago, engine oil was sort of 20 weight, 30 weight, 40 weight, 50 weight. It was a single weight oil. Then they had multi-viscosity oils, so sort of 10-30. So it acted like thinner oil in the winter and thicker oil in the summer. That's the higher the number, the thicker the oil. And now we have these synthetic oils that are so thin, they look almost like olive oil. They're so thin. And the engines that require that oil can actually start to run poorly if you use the wrong oil. So it's important to use the right oil. Changes recommended by the manufacturer. We used to say every 3,000 miles. Garages still say every 3,000 miles. Quick lube places will say every 3,000 miles. The newer car in our family says change it every 7,500 miles or 6 months. The Volkswagen in our family says change it once a year or every 10,000 miles. You don't, you're not going to do any harm doing it early, other than it's going to be more expensive. Both of our cars use synthetic oil or have synthetic oil in them. The Volkswagen is the only one that actually requires it. But it is money well spent to check your oil and change it when it gets dirty, and follow the owner's manual as far as when you should change the oil. Some of the other fluids, windshield wiper fluid, the easiest thing you can do to your car, filling your windshield wiper reservoir. Make sure you use windshield wiper fluid that's designed for winter weather, because it was kind of odd. A bunch of years ago, there was actually a windshield washer fluid shortage, and some of the chain stores and discount stores had wiper fluid, but it must have been something they bought down south, and it was only good to about 20 above zero. And on a cold winter day, it can get colder than that. So you want to get windshield washer fluid that's good for well below zero. Pre-mix fluid, the stuff that comes in the gallon container, is the easiest to use, and it's certainly the easiest task to figure out where to add the windshield washer fluid. Headlights and taillights, making sure your headlights are doing their job. We did a study back a while ago, and as a kind of, and it's pretty consistent, 1 out of every 5 cars has a light that's out. So it might be a headlight that's out, it might be a tail light that's out, a brake light that's out, and you want to make sure the lights work properly. You want to change them. You want to change them when it's convenient for you, not when all of a sudden both headlights burn out, which can happen. So you want to check all the lights and make sure that they work. The other thing is you want to make sure your headlights are good and clean. Headlights like this picture in the Volkswagen, those look really bright. But what can happen is over time, the plastic lenses can turn yellowy, and it can start to distort the light that comes out. In fact, we've seen some tests that when headlights get really cloudy, you can lose 70% of the lighting. There are all different kinds of lights on your car, warning lights, dash warning lights. Some are red, some are yellow, and it's for a reason. If it's a red light, it means stop whatever you're doing and do it immediately. Could be the oil light comes on. It could be which looks like the little kind of tea kettle kind of thing. It might look like a little oil can, or it could just say oil. The temperature gauge could come on. If it gets into the red, that means you need to stop right away. The battery light could come on, which means the generator doesn't work, the alternator doesn't work. And what could happen in that case is it maybe the belt came off of it, which could cause other things to happen, like the car to overheat. Yellow lights, like the ABS light, the check engine light, those don't require immediate attention. They don't need to be ignored. But if a check engine light comes on and the light isn't flashing, it's on steady, that means there's something wrong with the emission system, and that something that's wrong could be nothing more difficult to fix than the gas cap is loose. And you tighten up the gas cap, you drive it for a little while, and the light goes back out. The bottom right-hand corner, which is another kind of brake-related issue, your parking brake is on. So again, all kinds of things that can come up, all different kinds of warnings. The red ones are the ones you really, really want to pay attention to. The yellow ones, not as much. You still want to pay attention. You want to get it taken care of. If you have a check engine light that's on and it stays on, bring it into a garage. They'll scan it. They'll look and see what the code is. The code will lead them down the path to getting it repaired. Same thing, you might have an anti-lock brake light that comes on, not a red brake light, but an anti-lock brake light that comes on. And that just means the anti-lock brake system is malfunctioning for some reason. The car's going to stop normally, like a car with normal brakes before there was anti-lock brakes. Same thing, you might see a traction control light and other lights like that, that again, need to be repaired, but you don't need to pull over to the side of the road. Tires. Tires are critical to the car. It's the only part of the car that touches the ground, and you want to make sure the tires are in good shape. One of the most important things you can do is check tire pressure. use a good tire gauge, check them once or twice a month, and make sure that they're properly inflated. Also check the tire tread. The tire tread is, if the tire tread is too worn, it's not going to displace the water on the road. It's not going to give you the traction you need. Tire pressure is always a little bit confusing. People think the number on the side of the tire is the tire pressure. That's the maximum tire pressure. So, so you want to make sure that you've inflated the tires properly. When you open up the driver's door, there is a little placard that says what the tires should be inflated at. In this car, it's 32 in the front, 32 in the rear, and there's a spare tire, which is a temporary spare, and that spare tire needs to have 60 pounds of air in it. So check the tires with a gauge. You can't visually tell. You can't look at a tire and say, unless it's completely flat. And the tire pressure monitor systems, if you have a tire pressure monitor thing, it tells you if you have a low tire. Don't tell you the whole story either. Our older car has tire pressure monitor in it. The light came on. The tire was only a couple pounds underinflated. It's a very sensitive tire pressure monitor. And would that be a tire that I would have driven on? Sure, it would have. So, but still, most tire pressure monitors will come on when the tire is 5 pounds of air or less under the recommended amount. But in cold weather, they don't work. They don't. When the temperature drops to under freezing, they don't work very well. So checking with a gauge is the best thing to do. And having the tires properly inflated is really what helps improve the handling and the ride of the car too. Having good tire tread depth is good. We used to say take a penny and stick a penny in the tread of the tire, and if it didn't come up to Lincoln's head, the tire needed to be replaced. That would be, if you used a penny and you used that way of method, the edge of Lincoln's head is 2/32 an inch, 1/16 of an inch. That's in every state but Hawaii. That's a tire that's considered worn out. So better is to use a quarter. If the tread doesn't come up to at least Washington's head, then you probably need to think about tires. When it's up to at least the top of George Washington's head, there's 4/32 of tread. And the difference between a tire that's worn out and one that has at least 4 or 5 30-seconds, in wet weather at highway speeds, if you had a jam on the brakes, the car might, with the better tires, might stop in 40 or 50 feet shorter distance. And you can find videos of this online. So that's the difference between a major collision and one that didn't happen if you're able to stop in 60 feet less distance. So uneven tread wear can be from not checking tire pressure, a wheel alignment problem. Maybe you're just a hot rodder and you go around corners really fast, but you should measure the tire depth kind of across the whole tire, get a good idea of what's going on. So what happens if you do get a flat tire? Well, first off, don't worry about the tire that much, because chances are if it happened at highway speed, the tire isn't any good. But try to get yourself to a safe place. Slow down as quickly as you can. Take your foot off the gas slowly and slow the car slowly, if that makes sense. Easy on the brake. You don't want to jam on the brakes, because think of your 4-wheel car that now has a flat tire, so it's essentially almost like it's 3 wheels. And if you jammed on the brakes, the car could actually start to spin and skid out of control. Turn on your emergency flashers. Again, don't worry about the tire and the wheel. Hopefully the wheel will be okay. The tire, it might be. Call for help or wait for help or change the tire yourself. Windshield wipers, easy maintenance again. Changing windshield wipers is easy. They just kind of clip on. In fact, a lot of auto parts stores, if you go in and buy wipers, they'll come out and put them on for you. Replace blades when they smear the windshield, sure, when they don't work right. Most people only think of their windshield wiper blades when it's raining, and they go, oh, they're terrible. And then you get a bunch of sunny days and you don't think about it again, and then it's raining again and you think about it. Replace them when it's not raining and get new blades on there. You can clean the blades with alcohol. So a clean cloth and some alcohol, they'll take some of the road grime off the blades and it may extend the life a little bit. Replace the wiper blades every 6 to 12 months if you need to. The wiper blades on one of our cars lasted about a year, and the wiper blades on one of our other cars lasted about 3 years. And then a little piece of it came off. And then there's winter and all-weather blades. The blades that are on here are an older style winter blade, the blades in this picture. There's a metal covering sort of over the fingers of the blade that don't build up with ice and snow. And now they have these other styles that not quite as ugly looking as those, but it does the same thing. So it's sort of an all-weather blade. So it works good in the snow to keep snow and ice from building up on the windshield wiper blades. So why do you maintain your car? Why is it important? So you don't break down. The more you do maintenance before a necessary repair. So for instance, you had your tires rotated on your car every 6 months. And they looked at the brakes on your car while they were rotating the tires, and they go, you know what? The brakes are good for another 4,000 or 5,000 miles. Doing the brakes a little bit early is cheaper than waiting till they start to scrape and they score the brake rotors and brake drums. And then all of a sudden, the brake job that might be $300 turns into $500 or $600. So it can help minimize the cost of repairs. If you do regular maintenance like filters and tune-ups, which we don't really use the term tune-up much anymore, but still replace spark plugs when they need to be and things like that, you can find that it helps with gas mileage. Just inflating your tires properly can have a remarkable difference in fuel economy. You'll help the environment, you'll reduce your carbon footprint a little, and you'll be able to tell everybody how smart you are because you've done this yourself. So that's kind of our little bit that'll give you an idea about maybe some questions you might have for your own car or own problems. If you need to get a hold of me for any reason, my email is jpaul@aaanortheast.com. Or you can go to AAA.com/car-doctor. There's a little section in there that says Ask the Expert, and you can send that to me and I will be happy to ask it. I wish I had a prize if somebody knew what movie that car was in. But that's sort of the presentation. That's some of the basics. If you have a particular question about your car, and I guess we have a few people on here, just unmute your microphone and ask a question. I'll be happy to try to help you. Anyone? Well then. We have Beth that looks like she never really connected. And we have a few other people. So if you have something in the chat, you can look there. Let's see. No. Okay. So
I didn't realize you were finishing up. So everyone, if you have just a minute or so, if you want to put your chats in, so stick around for a little bit.
Or just unmute your microphone and ask a question. You can do that too. Be happy to try to help you. So and it's really all, this is all about preventative maintenance. So it's all about doing a few things that are relatively inexpensive that keep from causing more expensive problems. Something as simple as a tire that loses air will wear on the outside edges. When it wears on the outside edges, it accelerates the tire wear, and that tire that might have lasted 50 or 60,000 miles, if they're not inflated properly, might only last 30,000 miles. So all of a sudden you need to buy new tires. Changing oil in the car when it's supposed to be changed can make that engine last hundreds of thousands of miles. Forgetting about it, I remember being in a garage, visiting a garage a couple years ago, and there was a car that came in and the person wanted to have the oil changed, and they went to drain the oil out, and it came out, it looked like molasses, because apparently the last time they changed the oil was 3 years ago. So the oil kind of turned into this gooey mess. So it's important to make sure you do that that reasonable amount of maintenance. There are people that over maintain their cars. Again, there's no problem with doing that, but it's money you may not need to spend, and even environmentally, something has to be done with your old oil, the old oil filters, all that kind of stuff. So it's one more thing to consider. So doing a little bit of preventative maintenance, and that's what this is all about, preventative maintenance. The other thing is with COVID, a lot of people are concerned about bringing their car in for service, and what can happen. Do I need to be worried? Most of the garages that I've been to, they pretty much practice everything they need to do. They wear masks when they're talking to the customers. They kind of consider their garage their own little bubble, so they may not wear masks when they're working, but if a customer comes in, they'll put a mask on. Generally, I've found that they sanitize your car because they don't want anything, and customers sanitize their own cars. So I don't see a big problem. I did get an email from somebody in New Jersey this today, and they didn't want to bring their car in for state inspection because they were concerned. They were somewhat at risk, I guess, and they were concerned about COVID. And I had a couple of suggestions. Maybe have someone else bring it who isn't as worried. See if one of the local garages that does the state inspection actually picks cars up, because some people will do that. And then when you get the car back, if you're really concerned, just let the car sit for 3 days. The CDC says in the worst case, the virus on stainless steel surfaces, I think, only lasts 3 days. On porous surfaces, a lot less. So you don't really have a lot of concern, I don't think, with that. So what I would do if I got my car back from it being serviced, I might just wipe off the door handles, the seat belts, the radio buttons, the ignition switch, the ignition key, with just a sanitizing wipe, and I think you'll be in pretty good shape. Same thing too when you go to the gas station and get gas. If you're somebody who uses full serve gas or self-serve gas, like most of us do, wear a mask because you're out in public. Maybe gloves, or if you can't find gloves, an old bag from the supermarket, a plastic bag or something like that, kind of works as a glove. Put it on. Get your gas. Use it to touch the keys for your credit card thing if you're using a credit card, and then wipe your credit card off when you're done. I was very fussy about doing that at the very beginning of COVID. I'm a little less fussy now. I still wear a mask, but I carry hand sanitizer with me. So before when I'm done, I hand sanitizer, wipe my credit card off, and make sure I do my hands. I don't touch my face in between times, so that way I try to keep myself safe and keep other people safe at the same time.
All right, great. Those are great tips. We appreciate that.
Sure.
We didn't get any other questions in the chat, so I think that might be it.
All right.
Well, thank you for your time this evening. We really do appreciate you.
Well, thank you for having me. And again, if people have questions after the fact, jpaul@aaanortheast.com or AAA.com/car-doctor. And by the way, that's Stelmer and Louise in that car that was in the video.
Thank you again.
Okay. All right. Take care.